Greetings, Tenno. Do you like minions? Do you like off-meta builds? Do you get a dopamine rush from seeing your entire screen light up with enemies getting exploded? Allow me to introduce BeastMaster Khora. This build was actually posted by Reddit user CieKite, I think I'm saying that right, who created an excellent, detailed written guide to the build, and I encourage all of you to go check it out. I've had so much fun playing around with it that it inspired me to make this video to try to spread the word. I won't be giving the screenshot right up front this time because you can get them from CieKite's post, which I'll leave a link to in the description below. But for those of you who want a video guide, let's get into it. The best way I can describe the playstyle for this build is Pocket Varuna. We cast Ensnare on a target, then command Venari to attack it. Between Cole the Weak, Contagious Bond, Venari's Snare, and the Mecha set, the entire map will explode in a cascade of status effects. For tougher targets, you can use a primer if you want, and you can still spam Whipclaw if you'd really like to, though it's not really the focus of what we're doing. When Khora presses Venari's attack command, she immediately attacks the target, ignoring whatever posture mod you have on her claws. If Venari is too far away from the target, she'll teleport in to start attacking, and this behavior is the biggest advantage that Khora has over other summoner-style builds. Venari's Snare is also a 5-hit attack, giving 5 instances of damage along with a guaranteed slash procs in addition to modded statuses. The attack command, which is what causes Venari to snare a target, also completely ignores Overguard. Once you have a group ensnared and marked, you can basically just leave and look for the next group, or do a mission objective, look for the cache keys in a 1999 map, while Venari just destroys everything behind you. The drawback to this playstyle is heights. Venari can attack regular flying units like drones, but anything that has the lifted status, including targets caught in Strangle Dome, can't be reached by Venari. This also makes this a unique build where Strangle Dome is actually your subsume slot if you want to helmet something on. This playstyle is also rather flexible. Depending on the level of enemies and how you've built your companion, you might not even need to prime. You may not want to use Ensnare if the enemies are too spread apart, although Contagious Bond should still be doing work in that situation. There's no trying to keep up combo on a melee while I spam Whipclaw, or stand in one spot under Strangle Dome getting mad at my teammates for pulling all the enemies away from the room I'm camping. This build allows you to stay mobile, not worry about a stat stick, and get the dopamine rush of exploding an entire room full of enemies. Let's see how to put it together. Let's start with the Arcanes shards, because that's going to take the least amount of time. These purple shards are not what you're expecting. They're actually equilibrium shards. 2 Tau-forged purple shards will give you a 60% equilibrium effect, which I've found sufficient to sustain my energy pool. And speaking of which, the yellow shard is for energy filled on spawn. That little bit of extra energy lets us start our loop without having to drop an energy pad or use Zeneric as our focus school. It's optional, and you can definitely still use pads or wait for your Zeneric circle, but I like to spawn into a mission and just go. If you don't have the purple shards, I'll show you where to fit in equilibrium into the build later. The other 2 slots can be whatever you want. CieKite used 2 purple melee crit shards like you see on a typical Khora build, which isn't a terrible idea because it would let you have this build and a traditional Whipclaw spam build without having to get a second Khora or change your shards. You don't need 5 crit shards for a Whipclaw build, and I will die on that hill. Now for the mods. Khora mains, brace yourself. For this build, we used the Mecha set, which means we're going against convention and building Khora for health and armor tanking. The focus of the build isn't spamming Whipclaw, so shield gating doesn't make a lot of sense even if we didn't get the extra armor from Mecha Pulse. Since Venari is doing most of the damage, we don't actually need all the power strength you'd see on a typical Khora build. and we can get away with building more survivability. First, we have Mecha Empowered as our aura. The 4-piece set is going to let Venari destroy entire rooms. Mecha Pulse adds to the set, as well as providing us some armor. The armor from Mecha Pulse can be pretty unreliable, but we'll address that when we get to the Arcanes. Primed Flow gives extra energy. We may not be spamming Whip Claw, but we still need energy to regularly cast Ensnare and mark targets for Venari, so we definitely need the energy. Blind Rage is our only strength mod. Venari's snare attack benefits from strength, but not as much as Whip Claw does, so strength is less of a priority. Venari does a torrent of damage without a lot of strength. Adaptation gives us more damage mitigation. We can get away with it since we don't need as much strength, and the extra defense will help us push into higher levels, although this build's still not going to take you to level cap. Next we have our ranged mods, Stretch and Overextended. Blind Rage helps offset the strength loss from Overextended. We may not need a ton of strength, but we still want some. We also want a lot of range, so that Ensnare can grab more targets, though it doesn't affect Venari's snare attack. I'm using Archon Stretch because I have Electric on Venari's claws, which allows me to get some energy regen, but if you're not using Electric on her claws, then you can save a Forma and just swap it out for normal Stretch. Prime Continuity will give us more duration on Ensnare and Strangledome if we're using it. For the Exilis slot, Prime Sure-Footed would be the best in slot if you have it. You could also use regular Sure-Footed there if you don't have PSF yet, or anything you want. I considered putting Power Drift there for just a little more strength and some knockdown resistance, but I didn't want to spend more Forma, so I just left it locked. The astute amongst you will notice that I skipped the first slot. CieKite recommends Venari Bodyguard here for an extra layer of protection, and that's what I've been primarily using, but this is your flex slot. Equilibrium would be great here if you don't have Archon Shards, or you could put in something like Health Conversion, which would allow you to swap out an Arcane later on. If you decide to subsume something that needs an augment, you could also put the augment over Venari Body. Wait a minute. Hold on. Please work. Please work. Please work. Okay, honestly, I don't think that's the play. It makes the whole thing messier, and Venari doesn't actually need the help. On the other hand, oh yeah, that's the stuff. If you're going to subsume, I recommend Tempest Barrage, at which point you probably don't even need a primer at all anymore. If you use Venari Bodyguard, I recommend not subsuming anything, because if Venari goes down, it'll allow you to fall back to Strangledome with Whip Claw spam until she revives. If you're not running Venari Bodyguard, feel free to subsume if you want. For Arcanes, we're going with pure defense. Khora needs some help if we're going to try to health and armor tank with her, so we're going to start with Arcane Blessing. Once it's stacked up, Blessing will give us 1200 additional HP, which takes Khora to a relatively comfortable 1600 HP. In order to offset the random nature of Mecha Pulse, we use Arcane Guardian for more reliable armor. Guardian combined with our base armor gives us 1200 armor in addition to whatever we're getting from Mecha Pulse, which makes us a lot more survivable. If you don't have access to the Prime or Archon mod, you can just swap them out for their regular versions. If you don't want to run Venari Bodyguard, you can swap it out with the aforementioned Equilibrium, health conversion for more armor, an augment mod for a subsumed ability, or even a strength mod to give Venari or Whipclaw a little more damage. For Arcanes, I would definitely keep Arcane Blessing for the health, but if you use health conversion, you probably don't need Guardian anymore. So to replace that, first and foremost, do not use Arcane Camisado. Venari does not count as a summon. For replacements we can use though, you could try Arcane Reaper for more survivability if you really want to lean into the melee playstyle. The classic Molt Augmented for more ability strength. A weapon damage Arcane if you want to be more active than I am in these gameplay videos. Or Arcane Avenger. For Venari, we'll start with a base suite of damage mods. Contagious Bond is our street sweeper. Venari's snare attack deals 5 instances of damage. Each one gives a guaranteed slash proc, and it can proc statuses from her claws based on her status chance. Contagious Bond will cascade 50% of these procs outwards to other enemies, and since we're using electric on her claws, well. Contagious Bond will also regularly kill the mecha target, meaning you don't need to manually target them with the attack command. Next is the underutilized Fear Sense. To be honest, it's fairly unreliable, though it is a little easier for Khora to use because everyone is grouped up within Snare, letting Venari get an extra 200% damage occasionally. Tandem Bond rounds out the suite. A single heavy attack every 30 seconds will give Venari up to a 300% damage boost. It'll also allow her, or better yet, your companion, to raise up your combo counter, which lets us keep our combo up without having to actually light attack. The higher our combo, the more damage Venari gets. For survivability, we're using Link Fiber due to our high armor on this build, and Pack Leader, primed if you have it. Any melee attack, which includes Whipclaw, will heal Venari. I don't believe the Exalted rework is going to change Whipclaw counting as a melee either, so this shouldn't change. Next we add Hunter Recovery to allow Venari to heal us with her attacks. Venari has a heal command, but to be honest, it doesn't come close to Hunter Recovery. Heal command gives 50 HP a second, scaling up with ability strength, but Hunter Recovery gives 30% of damage dealt, and considering Venari can hit millions of damage, that's a much stronger heal. Our energy is going to be covered by Synth Deconstruct, which has a 25% chance to drop a health orb when Venari damages them. Contagious Bond counts as Venari's damage, so the floor is just going to be littered with health orbs for our Shards or Equilibrium mod to pick up. This is also why I say health conversion is a viable mod. Those are the 7 essential mods for the build, so here are some options to finish it off. Link Vitality. I haven't been using this and Venari hasn't gone down during any of my play sessions, but if you're struggling to keep her alive, you can add this for more survivability. Momentous Bond. This would allow Venari to have an extra random status for Contagious Bond to trigger. Territorial Aggression. This is the weakest option. The Shadow Cavat will count as Venari's attacks for Tandem Bond, Synth Deconstruct, and Hunter Recovery, but even within Snare, this one's really clunky. Vicious Bond. This will allow Venari to strip armor, but it'd be better used on your companion, who's going to be using regular attacks more than Venari. Animal Instinct. This one I also feel is better on your companion, but if you need the extra space on your companion for some reason, you can use it on Venari instead. They do not stack if you put it on both of them. And Tenacious Bond. If you want the extra crit chance on your weapons, you can toss this on and use Bite on Venari's claws. We're going with an honestly pretty close to standard build for Venari's claws. Maul and Cull the Weak for the damage. Venari has a 0% crit chance on her snare attack, meaning she'll also always get the 240% bonus from Call the Weak. Precision Conditioning gives a bunch more damage and converts all of our IPS to slash damage. Shocking Claws converts all of Venari's elemental damage to electric, which makes Contagious Bond even stronger, as well as adding even more flat damage. Then we add 3 60/60 mods. It doesn't matter which element, since it'll all be converted to electric anyway. We're just trying to get our status chance up, so we proc more statuses with her snare attack. And we finish off with immunity resistance for more status damage. If you want to incorporate bite into the build, just put it over one of the 60/60 mods. If you want to use something other than electric, then there's not much point in using Archon Stretch on Khora anymore. But electric is great anyway because it's an AoE dot that can cascade to multiple targets. As for posture mods, Snare won't gain extra damage against Overguard, so Assassin Posture loses a lot of its luster. We don't want Elusive or Protective Posture because it makes Venari return to you after each snare, which will slow everything down. Frenzied Posture gives extra status duration, but most enemies aren't going to survive long enough for it to matter anyway. Persistent Posture doesn't really work on any companion. Plus, we don't want to add impact to Venari's attacks anyway. We just want slash and electric. So that leaves us with Balanced Posture. The stagger that it causes also makes enemies move, which helps keep Venari from getting stuck on them. Since we want to use the mecha set, we're limited to Kubros and Predicites, but luckily, with all the changes, Kubros and, to a lesser extent, Predicites are actually good now. I tried both, and I found myself enjoying the Pharaoh Predicite the most, probably because I can't justify using it anywhere else. The only real requirements for the build are the 2 remaining mecha mods, but here's the build I used on the Pharaoh Predicite. The goal here is mostly for him to prime targets and hopefully not get the last hit. If you're going to use a primer on Khora, make sure to take note of what element you put on your companion claws so you can fill in the gaps. Since I'm using the Pharaoh's Indo-Parasitic Vector mod, he'll also add Viral regularly, and the slowing effect helps keep a little heat off you while you're running up to ensnare a group of enemies. You can also just mod them like Venari, but add in the mecha mods and have 2 of them running around, but I found them competing for kills to actually be a worse experience. For a primer, depending how long you intend to stay in a mission, a primer may not even be strictly necessary. However, if you want to bring one, just make sure you're using different elements than your companion in Venari. Some of my favorites include the Epitaph, the Compressa, and the Grimoire, especially if you're having energy issues. The melee weapon is a pretty important piece of this build due to us wanting to proc both Pack Leader and Tandem Bond. Tandem Bond leads to us wanting to use heavy attacks, so we can either set up a heavy spam build, or use Tennokai, or enter the Zenistar. That's right, it's not just for niche Ivara builds anymore. The disc is a heavy attack that scales its duration based on your combo count, and it keeps inflicting melee hits to trigger Pack Leader. By the time your disc expires, Venari and your companion are likely going to have your combo built back up to 12x, so you can just fire it off again. You can also mod it to use the disc as a pseudo-primer, which makes the Zenistar the perfect melee to make everything work if you don't want to actually play as melee for this build. But if you do want to play as melee, then just use your favorite heavy attack or Tennokai weapon. I hope this video inspired you to give this build a try. It is an absolute blast to play. I love playing summoners, and if I'm being honest, I didn't actually like Khora before this build. If I wanted to do negative a billion damage by hitting 1, I would just play Kalervo, which I do. But this build gave Khora an entire new lease on life for me. I think it's a lot of fun. Make sure to check out CieKite's post. It's got a lot of information in there, even more than I put in this video. And yeah, thank you for watching.